Christian parenting.
Hey, Vicki, how are you?
Hi, Courtney. How are you?
Good. We chatted a little bit before this. We have so much in common and we've known each other. We were trying to do the math. So, when one of your first books, Five Conversations, came out, Ella was a baby.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, it
I
was like
remember
oh
buying
08.
that book. That is
Mhm.
crazy. And here
Yes.
we are. You haven't aged a bit. Welcome.
Please, thank you. But yes, and that was also the year that I dropped my daughter off at Auburn.
Yeah.
So we might have that common denominator.
Uh-huh. So there's been some tears. There's
Yes.
been some tears, but
Just a few.
I one story I thought of that I don't know. Actually, I don't know if you remember that I came up to you at a conference, but
Mhm.
one of the very first conferences you spoke at, I think it was in Birmingham, and it was like Dot Mom or something like that. But I remember feeling like God was saying, like, you were on stage, and this is so embarrassing to say, but he was like, this is going to be you. And I was
Mm,
sitting in the back row, and I just thought, I think I want to. Like, I'm scared of what you're
mm,
saying, but I think I want God to use me like you, because here's the things I saw in you. You were so honest, you were hilarious, you were biblical, but you weren't making it all sound neat and tidy and perfect. It was like, hey, it is hard. And hey, you can do this. And I remember you saying, give grace to your first child. I'll remember that forever because
yes.
we're so hard on the first child. So just thank you for like
Oh,
all the resources. And I've used every one of them and just so geeked out when you contacted me about this newest book. I'm like, she's back, guys.
oh, you're so
The
sweet.
OG. Welcome back. So what made you come out of, grandparenting and taking a season away to, like, write another one?
Well, I think, when writing's in your blood, at some point you can't help but go back and do that thing. So
Yeah.
I think because I'm in a different chapter and
Yeah.
there was so much clarity, now I guess I'm coming up on, well, I'm 14 years into the empty nest years. And so
Wow.
I look back in some things, Courtney, I'm like, why was I writing parenting books when I had actual children still in the nest?
Same. Same, same.
And so now I feel like this is like the apology tour where and now I write the book that I wish had been around when
Yeah.
I was raising my kids that was, extending more grace and that's why like in this book I continually say in the introduction, this is not a parenting book.
Yeah.
Because, I feel like moms carry so many burdens. And
Yeah.
so this is the book that's like, okay, let's all catch our breath
Yeah.
here, yeah,
A
yeah.
little
So
mindset shift, I think. So before we get into that, will you tell people that don't know you just where you are in life, about your kids, how's everybody doing? Because some of my friends, again, were at that conference with me, so they'll be like, "Vicki Courtney, she's back."
well, yeah, so, okay, we have moved out of the big city, a few
Okay.
years ago, and that was Austin, Texas, and now we are in a little tiny, hill country town called Kingsland,
Yeah.
and my husband just retired a couple of months ago, so we're really thriving in the retirement
Mm,
chapter. We're about to leave to head to Colorado for a month, so doing fun stuff like that, but the best part of this chapter is that I have 10 grandchildren now.
10.
Yes, yes. We just had the 10th not long ago, and don't ask me when his birthday is because at this point I need a little Excel chart, keep track of their names and their
I think if
date
you've
of
got the
birth.
bookends, you're like somewhere between 10 and 0, 10 of them.
Yeah, somewhere in that range. So the oldest is 13 and youngest a few months old, but
Wow.
absolutely loving this chapter of life. And yeah, so that's
Do
where
you
we
feel
are.
like it's kinda my mom has said this. Do you feel like it is kind of a redo? You're like, "Oh, I'm gonna grandparent." Obviously, a grandparent's a different role than a parent because you don't have to discipline them as much, but do you
That's
feel
right.
like it's like, "Oh, these are the things I didn't have time to do because I was surviving, and now I can really I was gonna say
It is.
discipline is more disciple or encourage them."
It is all the perks. It is the reward for all your hard work, and they think you're a superhero on top of that. So, always say it's like just what's so ideal about it is you literally can just spoil them rotten, hand them back. You are not on the hook to raise them.
That's
You
right.
pray on the sidelines, try not to
Yeah.
interfere. But it is a delightful chapter, and so I love being able to watch them, and we didn't get to do it this past summer, but, like, I created a cousin camp, and we've had a
Love
few
it.
of those, and it's just pure chaos,
Yeah.
so yeah.
But there's a time to it. It's like on Friday, everybody's out of here.
Yes, that's right. We call it the grandkid hangover, and then we take a nap, my husband and I.
That's hilarious. Okay, well, let's dive into it. Motherhood is not your highest calling. And I remember when you sent it to me to endorse, and you go, I don't know if you're gonna wanna endorse it. I'm like, "Yes, I will. I don't care what you're writing, I'd endorse it." But I think it's an important conversation
Yeah.
because what we have heard for years and years and years is that it is our highest calling. So tell me why this mindset shift is important as you're looking at this glance way back to 40, 50 years of parenting going, "Okay, maybe we communicated this wrong."
Yeah, first of all, I mean, just to kind of tell on myself, I know that, I easily bought into that narrative. I really don't think there's any other narrative being given at the
Yeah.
time when I was
Yeah.
raising my kids. And I was actually a new believer at the time. And so I never questioned when you would hear that phrase, well, motherhood is your highest calling or a woman's highest calling.
Mm.
I ended up recycling it into parenting books that I wrote in the early 2000s. I share that in a chapter of this book about how I plucked an old vintage parenting book off my bookshelf and began to thumb through it. And instantly my eyes fell on that phrase, motherhood is perhaps a woman's highest calling. And
Yeah.
then I confessed that was a book that I had written.
Yeah.
So a little embarrassing here. I do say this book is the apology book, right, to your
Yeah.
generation and younger. But no, I didn't get it right in that respect. I got a lot of things right, just as I think
Yes,
as
you
moms,
did.
we need to be able to say that. We got some things right and we got some things wrong. And but that one, when I began to unpack it, I realized nowhere in the Bible does it say that a woman's highest calling is motherhood or marriage for that matter. And
Yeah.
so, and there it wasn't like this one aha moment. I would say there were, several different factors that just along the way that caused me to kind of rethink it. A big one, another one that I shared in the book is when my daughter, so I have 2 sons and a daughter, girl in the middle, and she, after a year into marriage, she struggled with infertility for
Mhm.
several years. And I talk about how painful that was to watch her walk that road of suffering with her
Mm.
husband, and I found myself at a loss for words on how to really comfort her. And at one point, and I share this in the book, where I had to deliver the news that my son and my daughter-in-law were expecting their second child.
Mm.
She just, collapsed in my arms and we cried together and I found myself struggling for the right things to say. And, well, honey, your life still has purpose even without children, because we're not knowing at that time if she would ever be
Right.
able to have children.
Right.
And so anyway, she, responded something, but mom, you've always told me that marriage and motherhood are part of what God has for me. And so Courtney, it's in that moment, those moments like that where you're like, wait a minute, you know, I know God's trying to teach me something in this
Right.
chapter as well. And so I think in the aftermath of that, and while she was still walking that painful road, I began to really, even ponder, could I have felt fulfilled had I never had
Yeah.
children? Could I have found joy? And of course the answer is yes, right? We have this
Yes.
head
Yeah.
knowledge of that. But in that moment where I thought that might be her reality, I had to ask myself that question. And then I apologized to her for maybe really, implying along the way that that was just a given, that that was going to be a part of her life.
Yeah. And all the single girls in the world are like, "Preach it. Thank you."
Another huge factor is I began to get more out of my bubble, when my kids left the nest and be exposed to, whether it was just the infertility issue or women that never married or women who were married that weren't able to have children or chose not to have children and how they have their perspective of, assuming that if this is my highest calling, what does that mean that God has relegated me to a lesser calling? Or,
Mm.
it's just so many big questions. And of course, the answer to that is absolutely not no, because we
Right.
got this wrong. But I say in the book, that doesn't mean we don't celebrate motherhood.
That's right.
It's one of my greatest joys in life. But I talk about, our highest calling. I mean, it's spelled out for us: love God with our heart, soul, mind, and strength, love our neighbors ourselves. Second Corinthians talks about we are called to be his ambassadors. I've always loved that passage,
Yes.
and that he has given us a ministry of reconciliation to go and share the gospel with others.
Mm.
And so that raising our children is a subset of that calling
Right.
as a minister.
Right.
So, that was really eye opening as I began to unpack it and ask myself the question, okay, do I view myself as first and foremost a minister
Yeah.
or a mother?
Wow.
I think that's a true test for us, right?
It is, it is. I couple things. I love this, and I love this conversation because I have thought about this probably in the last 5 years as my kids have gotten old enough to wanna date and all that, and catching myself about that because it's easy to say, like, when you're a mom, when you're a wife, and go like, "I don't know," and they've said, "Mom, that's so scary, we want that." I'm like, "I know, and God wants that," but
Yeah.
that's not and so I think that's an important conversation that you're reminding us to have that I didn't think about to the last several years, but I do wanna encourage you. I don't remember you saying that or holding you to it. What I remember it doing for me was making myself realize it was a high calling. It was had value. And
Yes.
so
Good.
that
Good.
statement,
And that
it
is
really
important.
did. It really did because I thought I left this huge career at Chick-fil-A. I was doing all kinds of crazy things nationally and had this office and then you're like, "Am I a babysitter? Like, am I literally changing diapers?" And I thought I was smarter than this. I think the term high calling just gave value to me to go like, the work I am doing is not for nothing. It may not prove
Right.
itself until these college years, but it's really important to create these disciples. So it gave me fire. I would have probably said back then, and not knowing it wasn't biblical, it was the highest calling. And now I'm wrestling with, did I put it in first place? I just dropped off Ella, and there is a legit identity crisis. It's
Mhm.
like, I put everything into that. And
Yes.
I've had other side hustles like you. I've been doing other things,
Right.
but in the core of me, I think I would say someone say I was a great mom. That's all I've ever wanted is to someone
Right.
say I was a great mom. And so it's a wrestling, to get honest. And I love that you're making us do that. So why do you think you can react to any of that? But my next question would be, why do you think that narrative has been harmful? What do you think was the behavior that came behind believing this is our utmost calling?
This is where in developing the chapters that really helps, untangle some of the mess this has created, right?
Hmm.
Because when we believe the narrative that motherhood is our absolute highest calling, then you just said it a minute ago, Courtney. You said I put everything into that. Well, I said, when you put all your eggs
Yeah.
in that basket, that this is my purpose, my highest purpose. This is my identity. This is the most important thing I'll ever do in my life.
Hmm.
Then when that last child leaves the nest, you are in a world of hurt because you have to go through, you said that phrase, an identity shift or crisis. It is an identity crisis, even
Yeah.
if you have a bunch of side hustles going on, which
Yep.
I did as well. Traveling, speaking, book
Yeah.
deadlines. I mean, our last child left the nest and I became a grandmother 3 months later. So
Wow.
you can't get better timing than that because I literally just kind of sailed into the next chapter of life and it made it not quite as bittersweet to
Yeah.
turn my attention, of
That's right.
course, all my focused attention into the first grandchild, which gets a good bulk of it,
Yeah.
right? By
That's right.
default
That's
of being the
right.
first. So, but even so, there is just this struggle with, okay, now who am I? Because I put so much into this and I don't really know what to do with all this now. And it doesn't
Yeah.
matter if you work full time, it doesn't matter if you've been home during those years. I think most moms would admit that they struggle with, who am I now when I
Yeah.
don't have this as my sort of primary role? Because by default of all their needs and all the things that we have to do, to care for our children, it is all consuming. And then all
Yeah.
of a sudden it comes to a screeching halt. I mean, you
Absolutely.
still have some times they need you in college or if they go out into the working
Yeah.
world. But overall, you're punching out.
Yeah. My heart is pounding. My heart is I'm not crying yet, but I'm like, "Oh, this is so real for me right now." So, I noticed you wrote about perfectionism, which I think is so easy to go, "I want to do it right, and I wanna do it" because 'cause I'm like,
Mhm.
loved working for Chick-fil-A, love the podcast, but at some point, you're gonna be like, "I gotta go to bed." Like, I would stay up for days and throw myself in front of a truck for my kids. So, it was like, there's this level of we're never done, it's never good enough,
It's never
and
enough.
then and I think so getting it right versus being faithful are 2 different ways to look at it. So, many of years, I just wanted to get it so right, and I thought there was a formula, and we say on this podcast 100 times a week, there is no formula. But when you're
Nope.
in it, I think this was probably part of the problem, is that we thought
Yeah.
if it's our highest calling, we
We
wanna
have
honor
to get it
God,
right.
we have to get it right. So,
We
help us
can't.
unpack that.
Yeah, yeah, and really that is the core of the book, is that when you believe that narrative, it's your highest calling, you can't afford to get it wrong.
Mm,
And so you are consumed with getting, yeah. getting it as right as possible
Right.
all the time.
Yeah.
And, of course, that breeds a lot of motherhood guilt
Mhm.
because guess what? We're not going to get it right. Sometimes
Right.
we don't even know what is right for one child is not right for the next child. And so, just as you said, there's no formula. And so, and
Mhm.
I was writing these things,
Yeah.
and I believe these things in my core, but practicing them at times was difficult when you've embraced that narrative because
Yeah.
you still can't help but carry that intense responsibility that I am on the hook
Right.
for these little lives. And if this is my so called highest calling, I cannot afford to get it wrong. So, yeah, it breeds a lot of guilt. It breeds a lot of worry over all the things that we have to worry about and things that we didn't know we were supposed to be worried about.
Right. Right.
We can get caught up in the trap of, and these are all kind of chapters in the book, but creating this idea of a magical childhood
Yeah.
for our
Yeah.
kids. And so I really feel like that's another byproduct of believing this kind of false narrative that it's your highest calling because you're like, wow, I only have them for this short amount of time in my direct care. And so I want to create this magical childhood for them, which means that I put them at the center of my world and all of my needs come last or
Right.
somewhere further down the list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love it. Okay, so I'm always like, okay, what do we do? So, and I know that's not a neat answer, but I'm like, so looking back or to the moms that have younger kids, what is a practical shift they could do? Is it just this knowledge of going like, Lord, I recognize you are my
Yeah.
highest calling, following you, serving you is the most because you're not saying throw your hands up and
Yeah.
just don't be
No.
engaged in parenting. It's still a high calling. So what practically can we do if we're like, shoot, she's like reading my mail. I'm feeling nervous.
I think you just nailed it. I mean, first it starts with acknowledging that, maybe I got this wrong, or maybe am putting all my eggs in this basket. And I think one of the ways we can kind of test that, right? A little self-test here for your listeners is to imagine what it will feel like when your last child leaves
Mm,
the nest. And I talked about that a lot when I would speak to mom groups all over the country. And I
mhm.
remember being up on the stage and looking out there and seeing tears, unless it was like someone who had teenagers and they're exhausted. And then there was like a
Take them.
mix of, yeah, they had a countdown on their phone, or whatever. But
Right.
I think for a lot of moms, that's hard to even imagine because you're so deep into it. And
Mhm.
yet the reality is we will spend more years not parenting our
Yeah.
children than parenting our children. So that should be a good kind of wake up call for us that, wait a minute, God would never want me to put everything aside and throw again, all my eggs into that one basket, only to wake up one day and have this huge identity crisis, have to
Mhm.
figure out what do I even like doing? What
Right.
can I do in my spare time? Or even more sadly, your marriage has suffered
Yep,
because
yep.
you've bought into that narrative. And that was at some point put on a back burner as well.
Right.
So, yeah, I think it's just having a conscious awareness that I may have bought into this. And, it's not like one of those snap your fingers and it gets better overnight. I think it's more of I'm doing that thing again where I'm lapsing into that mindset. And maybe it's, your calendar. You're looking at your calendar and you're like, we're all exhausted.
Yeah.
So let's unpack this a little bit. Where is this coming from? What part
Mhm.
of me has believed that I have to sign my kids up for all the things, that we have to have a busy, packed calendar all the time?
Yeah.
On this side of it, 14 years post, that emptiness moment, now we sit around in family gatherings and I'm like, which one of y'all were you in soccer every year? Were you no, I know this sounds so unreal, doesn't it? Like, you ever play an instrument? Like, didn't we do like, and so you have like these moments in the aftermath where you're like, I don't even remember
So
all that.
funny.
But yet when you're in the thick of it and you're so exhausted, you certainly want to think that they're going to look back and go, that made me who I am today, mom, that you were shuttling me here and there and
Yeah.
everywhere.
Or blaming you, being like, "Mom, I could have been on the US world soccer team, but you
Yes.
went on a date night with dad."
Uh,
And you're like, "Ah,
uh,
you just don't want it to be your
exactly.
fault,"
Yes, that's the guilt chapter again.
Okay, so many, so many. Okay, one thing that you said and made me think of, so this is true confession. Ron loves me so much. Like, I am not as good of a wife than he is a husband. Like, I am his entire world, and he has proper order. Like, Jesus, me, kids.
Yeah.
The kids oftentimes bump ahead of him, which I can see it and I know it. But one day, I felt like I was carrying the full weight of his happiness one time. And I was
Mm,
like, "I'm not built for this. Like, I want to make you happy, but, like, this has to be a thing with you and God too." And it made me
mm,
just think as you were talking about even the weight that we put on our kids. And even now, like, I think Ella's feeling sad because I'm sad. And I'm like, well, I'm putting guilt on her to be thriving and living the life I prayed for.
yeah,
Poor thing is like scared to tell me it's wrong. So I think that too is like we got to think about our kids and
yeah,
emotionally what that does to them to say, I am only okay if you're okay. And I'm only a person if you're in my
mm,
home kind of stuff, which we do from good intentions, but it can start.
yeah.
I'm noticing the side effects now. It's like, oh, shoot, should have corrected that, but
Yeah, shoulda, coulda, woulda.
should have.
I mean, and I think that's part of it is, I want this to be a book that extends or invites mothers, I should say, into this mindset of freedom, right?
Yeah.
So that we don't feel this pressure to get
Mm.
everything that just when you were expressing your regret
Mhm.
over, okay, well, what is wrong with, okay, now you, after the fact, you've realized some things.
Yes,
Isn't that really normal? Isn't that really, and sometimes it may merit a conversation and
that's
going
right.
back to said child or your spouse and saying, now that I'm on this side of okay, take for example, we talked about my daughter's, infertility journey. And I was able to, instead of just wallow in guilt, because remember, moms just
Yep.
naturally assume that all of this is my fault.
Yep.
I'm sure that I exposed you to too many microplastics or I don't know what. And this is, you know, so your first thought is always, I've done something to cause this, right? Sadly, that's where we go. But then, also to just be able to go to them and say, and in this case, I was able to tell her, I'm sorry that I
Mm.
led you to believe along the way that marriage and motherhood were guaranteed for your future and that they were your highest calling as a woman.
Yeah.
And, I'm still learning and unlearning some things in life and untangling some things. And I didn't get it all right. And there's great freedom that comes in that. Not to mention, I think it's just healthy for our marriages. It's healthy for our children to see us be able to say that out loud
Yeah.
and to not just be all weighted down with guilt. Yeah, I was supposed to get it all right.
Yeah.
So
That's
that's the
great.
freedom that I want to invite moms into that don't know that there's a lot of it there for my
Mm.
generation. And that makes me feel just a sadness, not just for my generation, but for your generation and the
Yeah.
generation to follow you that are raising the littles now
Yeah.
because there's so much pressure out there.
One thought as practical I had for people, and I think you've mentioned this, was like, I think learning yourself. Like, and so maybe you're sitting there and these moms are like, well, I don't even know what I would do. Like, they are my whole life because they've all I've got. And so
Right.
part of me was like going, okay, what do I actually, and it doesn't mean going back full time. It could be. It doesn't mean going back part time. It doesn't mean
Right.
work. It could be church and volunteering. It could be, I led a small group for the last 4 years and pouring into those girls gave me such life, like
Right.
to be able to order that out. So learning yourself is one thing I would love to just encourage people to do. And then the second thing is, as you said, burners, I literally always have burners in my mind. So there was a season where I had everything on high. So boiling was
Mm.
podcasting, writing, speaking, kids mom, school mom, church. And I was like, I'm about to die. And so
Hmm.
what I thought was, well, I love all those things, but there's a reality of time. And so we're not saying like completely shut everything off or completely put it all to boiling. So I just put things down to simmer. I put things off. I
Yeah.
didn't speak for a while. It's going back up now because one person's out of the house. So, did that help you in seasons of like they still, although they're not your highest calling, they're still in your house every day? So, like, how can you balance and just encourage the moms that I do think it changes over time? And
Yeah, and first of all, I love your analogy of the
mm,
burners and just dialing it down to simmer. I mean, I
yeah,
wish I should have used that in a book,
yeah,
Courtney.
for your next one.
Right, right. Give you credit, of course.
Okay, of course.
No, I think that's a lot of it is sometimes we learn the hard way, right? We're
Hmm.
in it and we're like, this is just not working. And we're all
Hmm.
exhausted and we're biting each other's heads off and something has to change. And this pattern is not a good pattern. So
Right.
I remember, and I think it was my 5 Conversations books where I confessed that that was our reality. Everything, I love that, to use your analogy, was
Yeah.
boiling, and I had
Yes.
several pots that I still didn't there was no burner for them,
Right.
So, we were overwhelmed, and we had this, like, come to Jesus meeting in our marriage, and we're like, "We can't go at this pace any longer," so we sat the kids down, and we're like, "Okay, from this point forward, we're gonna do 1 activity per child per season," and I only wish that we had done that sooner, because what it did was it took it down, in your analogy, your beautiful analogy, to a simmer, and then we were able to have a little bit more margin to catch our breath, to concentrate, on the marriage or self-care or whatever that looked like. And so sometimes it's just paying attention to what your body's telling you,
Yes.
what the Lord is telling you. And those
Yes.
times you spend with Him, if you've got the margin where you're able to do that, He will be faithful
Yeah.
to point out when you need to dial things down a
Yeah.
notch or 3. S
Yeah. And sometimes it doesn't make sense. I feel like for moms, we compare in social media, we blame it every week, but it's true. We're like looking, well, Vicky does this. Well, Karen does this. And it's like, no, God is telling me specifically
Mhm.
to lay down something that was taking too much time or whatever. And so I think that's part of the challenge is looking at your friends and trying not to compare. And beautifully that you said that. It's like, Lord, what do you want from me in this season with my kids so that we don't go crazy and we don't kill each other halfway through the process?
Right, right, and I love how you mentioned social media because, see, that's where things have changed a lot. I mean, I don't envy this generation of mothers that, you get online and there are just you're bombarded with reminders of your shortcomings, your perception of them, I should say, because it seems like you're seeing a highlight reel from everyone else, and especially these mom influencers, and I mean, for researching the book, because I have a whole chapter that kind of untangles that whole the pressures, the comparison trap, and so I started following some of the mom influencers. I could not wait to get on and unfollow them after turning my manuscript in. I was exhausted as a grandmother. I was like,
That's
"What in
amazing.
the world?" I can't imagine how I would have felt as an actual mom in the trenches now raising my kids to get on and see the homesteader moms milking their cows and making their own bread from their sourdough starter and going and picking the microgreens out of their garden out back. My kids, I was like, "Here's a toaster strudel."
Yeah.
We're gonna deal with this. And now we know those are really bad for you, so I'm not endorsing those, but
It's
I'm
all
just
right.
saying they're okay to not have to be all those things, and that doesn't mean, if you're not delivering your 7th child in a bathtub with a midwife, that you're a bad mother. So this is where we have to be careful that we are not comparing ourselves to other mothers, and I bet they have some hard stories going on in the backdrops of their lives as well, and so it's difficult for all of us, but I talk about knowing your capacity and not, you know God gives each of us different temperaments and personalities and capacities. And it doesn't mean that, if you can't help your child create the best school project because you didn't inherit that creative gene, that you're not as good a mom as so and so who did her child's project. Let's be honest. Okay, there are those mothers. And so you have other gifts and talents and things that you bring to the table. And so it's just having that awareness that you have gifts, you have a capacity, you've got to honor that and resisting that urge to constantly be trying to line yourself up next to what you're seeing online, because that's also a false narrative. I do think moms in your generation and younger are like, I noticed my daughter recently. I was like, I haven't seen anything on Instagram lately. We talk all the time anyway,
Yeah.
but she's
Yeah.
like, "Oh yeah, I had to get off, mental health." So I
Yeah.
think y'all are better about like, I got to take a break from this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It's good.
definitely encourage that.
Well, Vicky, I could do this 500 times with you, but I'm so excited about this resource for the moms listening because I do give them a lot of resources and to dos. And it's like, this is probably going to be one of those ones that, as you said, we're going to dial down the guilt. We're going to dial up the freedom. And we all need that. Like, we all need more freedom, more grace and motherhood, and less just feeling so bad about ourselves. So I'm going to give you the last word. Like, as you think about moms of all ages getting this message in their hands, what do you hope settles into their heart, either from God or about them or about motherhood?
I would hope that they walk away, confidently saying, "Wow, I am more than a mom.
Mm,
God has created me to be more than a mom. Being a mom is a great honor. But first and foremost, I'm a child of his, and he loves me and he cares for me and he has a future for me even once my kids leave the nest. And
Mhm.
so there would be an excitement, and that's the other thing is I feel sad that my generation is kind of also, we've told the younger generation oftentimes, oh, enjoy these years are the best years of your life. And we've left younger moms with this sense of dread over the empty nest years. And so
Mm,
I really want, maybe that's the next book, Courtney. I don't know. But
yes.
I feel like it's gotten a really bad rap. It needs a new
New
PR
name.
campaign. I'm happy to be a part of that. I'm having the time of my life, I'm telling you. And it is the reward for the hard work that we've done. So I want moms to know that, you approach that not with this sense of doom and gloom, but that's the reward for these hard
Mm.
years. And so really just that they would walk away knowing I'm more than a mom. I'm first and foremost a child of God, and he has a plan and a purpose for my life even when I'm not in the trenches parenting my children.
Thank you for this. Absolutely loved it.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
Good to see you.
Christian parenting.